So welcome, I'm Adam Jewitt. I'm Senior Manager of Unstructured Data Solutions at Dell Technologies in the UK. I'm here with Sam Major. Sam is the Commercial Director at Krome Technologies, who are key Platinum partners of ours. Okay, so back in 2020, between lockdowns, I had the pleasure of meeting Sam and the members of his team. And we're here today to talk to you about a solution called StorARCH. So StorARCH is something that's immediately obvious. They created something unique. It offers significant value to our clients across multiple industry verticals. So today we're here to talk about the solution, the use cases it has, and how it can deliver for our clients. So firstly, Sam, why don't you tell us where the idea came from?
Certainly. Thank you, Adam. I guess the idea came from the fact that a customer asked me if I could solve a problem for them, and as any salesperson would say, I said yes. And then we had to work out whether we could, which was the interesting part, because the customer had gone to market looking for a solution, and checked Gartner and all the standard places and realised that there wasn't actually a solution that existed that could do what they needed to do. So we were involved in a bit of POC and had to design from the ground up a solution to ingest 9,000 DAT tapes that had 450 million call recordings that may or may not have contained what they call the PAN and SAD data. People in finance will be aware, the credit card, the long number and the number on the back, etc. And we had to bring those into our solution, which was a cloud-based solution hosted off-site, give their users access to it without caching the call they're listening to locally to keep it all PCI compliant, and then also to build a purge engine in, so that after a certain date, those calls were purged from the system. So again, nothing existed that could do that. From the ground up, that's where we coded, wrote, programmed, etc., and developed StorARCH. And if you fast forward 8 years down the line and 8 years of development, we now have a solution that not only does voice, but does video, does mainframe, does any file format you can think of. We've yet to find one that we can't manage, and does the full retrieval, redaction process. So for things like compliance, amazing. For helping people remove legacy architecture, let's be honest, a lot of customers, your customers, will have boxes that are sat there spinning their disks just because from a compliance reason they have to have them, and we offer them the ability to turn that off but retain access to the data, so from an audit and compliance perspective they're absolutely protected.
Well, that's fantastic, Sam, and I understand you've got a video you can show us which will give us an overview of the offering. Absolutely
we do. So it's well worth investing 2.5 minutes to watch the video. It very concisely sums up what StorARCH does and how it does it. I could tell you, Adam, but this recording will be about 3 hours long. So if we play the video, let the viewers use that to understand better the context of this call, and then I guess we can knife and fork through some of the detail once we've watched the video. So I guess play the tape.
The data world is constantly changing. For businesses, keeping on top of the data you manage and the responsibilities you have to keep it readily available and safe is complex and expensive. GDPR has revolutionized the landscape of corporate data practices and made significant waves in compliance standards. Add to that the rising tide of organizational complexity and the eruption of strategic restructuring activity. It's clear that there's a need to simplify operational access to data in a way that is intuitive, efficient, and doesn't cost the earth. StorARCH is a secure digital storage, archive, and retrieval solution, hosted on-site or in the cloud. With it, you can create a secure environment where your structured and unstructured data can live. And you can navigate around this environment to search, retrieve, redact, and display the information you need at a moment's notice. All your data is available online, with controlled access via a web browser provided to your team based on their role. Everything is easily searchable to view or download through a secure portal. With your entire data footprint centralized in one harmonious ecosystem, you can decommission costly legacy systems, enabling your organization to reduce its physical footprint and simplify your data landscape. StorARCH helps businesses to work in harmony with the real world too, by supporting a paperless document workflow. StorARCH is compliant with PCI DSS security standards, as well as ISO 9001 quality standards. Your data is protected with backup and disaster recovery solutions to meet your needs and fully support your business continuity plans. With GDPR in mind, you can rest easy with full audit trails for data access and usage, and the ability to undertake targeted data purging at the end of its retention lifecycle. To find out how StorARCH can help your business achieve regulatory compliance, improve operational efficiency, and reduce costs, get in touch with us today to arrange a demonstration.
So Sam, fantastic video, and look, that gives us a fantastic overview of the strength of the StorARCH offering. I'd just like to now dig into some of the key salient points in it. And probably the first one I'd like to raise, we talked to a lot of our customers around the legacy systems, the cost of aged and technical debt. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in terms of saving that cost for your customers?
Absolutely. And you are right. It's a huge amount of investment goes into, let's call it keeping the lights on. You and I and people watching this video no doubt have walked around a lot of data centres and seen a lot of very beige looking equipment, as it used to be that many moons ago. And there's a reason for that. Technical architects were told at the time, build a solution to take care of this problem. And they've done that, and that's fantastic. But not everyone has an eye on what could happen in 15, 20, 25 years' time. So we unintentionally build these technology cul-de-sacs, and they become more and more costly every year in the maintenance of the hardware, in the foot space they take up in a data center. Go back 15, 20 years, and you'd be lucky to get 250 gig of space in a rack. It's obviously very different these days. Add to that the costs of extended support on things like Microsoft. I won't name names, but I have a customer who is paying a multi-million pound bill for extended support on Microsoft. And that is not unusual, and it's simply because they're stuck on proprietary systems with no real easy way to get out of there, but a very real-world requirement to have access to that data for the regulators and for things as we touched on like GDPR and et cetera, et cetera. So what we do is we enable them to remove and cut that tie to that legacy architecture. We retain the data, but without the requirement of having it being tied to the legacy application. And we consolidate. So we can take lots of disparate systems and bring them into one place. We have a customer right now who has collapsed 30 separate systems into one with a roadmap to take them easily out to 60. Now that's, if you imagine a system is a rack, that's 60 racks that have disappeared into one. So just from heat and power, that's a huge saving. Then we factor in the operational savings of actually accessing that data. So, we'll probably talk a bit more about compliance in a minute, but, people have to access the data. That's why they retain it. And that's very difficult when you have lots of disparate legacy systems that don't talk to each other. Whereas if you bring these into StorARCH, we can search all that data for a singular interface, and it is very simple. I know you've seen it, so I'll describe it to you anyway. But it's like a Google page, as you know. It couldn't be any simpler to actually access that data. Once we've collapsed it into StorARCH and reduced your footprint in the data center hugely. Obviously legacy architecture and the removal of is massive. And to give you a number, we have yet to undertake, to build a business case for a customer where we've not been able to show at least a 75% cost saving on doing what they're doing today versus transitioning to StorARCH. So there's hundreds of different reasons to do this, compliance and operational efficiency, etc. But if any business isn't interested in savings of 75% or more, questions should be asked.
Well, no, absolutely. I know you saved hundreds of thousands and many, many millions of pounds for your customers as well. I have to go back to, I'm not sure you're old enough to remember racks that had 250 gig of data in it. but I'll believe you.
Sadly, I do.
So look, again, we see it, we share the value. Unstructured data, we're all around consolidating workload. So again, it resonates with us. You talked about, you probably alluded to ease of management there as well. My understanding is you deliver this as a full managed service. So in fact, for training and the expertise need from the customer is relatively small.
Indeed, yeah. So we offer it in a few different ways. So we're not completely prescriptive, as in you must have it this way. But when you get into the business case with a customer, it just is more efficient when you look at the different options for them to give it to us and for us to deliver it as a managed service. The whole thing with StorARCH is taking away the legacy data problem. So the management thereof, where you host it, and is it patched, fed, watered, all that sort of stuff. If you can outsource it, make it someone else's problem, kind of why wouldn't you? So, yeah, most of the solutions we do are as a managed service. Absolutely, that's definitely the way to go from what we're seeing.
Cool. And you can do that on-prem, or you can host it out of a Krome data center. Am I correct in saying that?
You're absolutely correct. So we can host that in our data center. We can do that in the likes of Azure and AWS and whatnot, in ECS, obviously. But it is much easier to have our full service wrapper around the solution. And we should talk about actually the ease of use of the solution. A lot of these systems that people are trying to push legacy data into and whatnot, there is still a huge demand on IT. So wherever the data resides, there's a request to IT, I need file X, Y, and Z. It's many years old, it relates to case, whatever it might be. IT have to intervene at some point, and there's an overhead on IT to manage this legacy data and this legacy platform. With StorARCH, it's self-service from the people that require the data. So it could be, for example, call center users trying to find a call that's in question. They can go into the system themselves, search by whatever metadata we've created, and by the way, if the information we gather from a customer is light on metadata, we have ways that we can actually help them create the metadata for the system. So it's not a problem if someone's system is light on metadata. They can then search by, as I say, in a call center. It could be by time, date, customer number, line ID, etc., and find that piece of information, redact that piece of information, and recall that piece of information based on user access user access controls. So we define who is allowed to do what, obviously. But that entire process can happen without any intervention from IT. And when you look at the operational savings of that, they can be huge. And I will give you one example, actually, of a good saving. So we have a customer which manage data subject access requests. So that's when you're calling into a bank, an insurer, whoever it might be, and you as Adam Jewitt are requesting all the information they hold pertaining to you. This particular customer, it was a 2-week process. And the reason it was a 2-week process was lots of disparate legacy systems to access, to try and find information that related to you, to then, and this is not a joke, literally print it off, and then the redaction process was a Tipex or a Sharpie, and then they would staple that together, and that could then be sent to the customer. That process was a 2-week end-to-end process, a manual process. That is now a sub 30-minute process by using StorARCH. We've calculated the savings for that £500,000 per annum just on one process in their business, which is now simplified via the application of StorARCH as a product.
Wow, it's unbelievable to think people still do that in this day and age, isn't it? So in terms of saving money and total cost of ownership, we retire legacy applications, we consolidate into a really small 75% of saving into a repository. I mean, look, I echo that from the Isilon file system or the ECS object store. Again, we kind of work with you with one. It could be a small solution that scales up in a really simple to manage set and forget way. So again, we just complement the savings you add into this as well. So total cost of ownership is fantastic. And that example as well of the users just doing that in sort of 30 minutes is just outrageously different from where they were.
The simplicity, absolutely, of things like Isilon, the way that you guys scale, and the simplicity of doing so, I think that's why it works so well with what we do. They're two very, if you look under the bonnet, they're very complex. What they do is exceedingly clever. On the face of it, it looks rather simple. And the fact the ease of the way you guys can scale when you need to, it is brilliant. No interruption to service, always on, all that sort of good stuff, which works great for what we're trying to achieve here with StorARCH. As people bring stuff into StorARCH, it's what we see very often is we go in to address point number one, and we put a solution in place, and then the compliance or records people go, we could use it for this and this and this, and it fails. So having a back end, if you like, that can grow easily without service interruption is vitally important for the way we manage our product, and obviously hence the synergy between us and UDS.
And we see lots of customers who do exactly what you say. They think of a use case, they do something. If they don't get the plumbing right, which will scale with them at the time, whether it be 10 terabytes up to how many petabytes, if they don't get that right up front, they end up doing it again and again. They end up in that technical cul-de-sac again. So,
Absolutely.
And what about things like encryption and ransomware and things like that? This is GDPR compliant, so I'm assuming we can cover ransomware from a Isilon and ECS perspective, but I'm assuming you've got encryption and other features in there to remain compliant.
Yeah. Everything you'd expect. So it's all fully encrypted. We're protected behind layer 7 application firewalls. We have 0-day threat agents on all the technology. So as you can imagine, the data that we're storing for our customers is very sensitive. This is financial data. This can be healthcare records. This is not the sort of thing that can get out into the public domain without there being some severe consequences. So by working with your team at Dell, it's security by design. So the way we've built StorARCH, fundamentally, that has to be a secure repository, or let's be honest, it's dead in the market before we even move. And then you layer that, if you like, with the Dell Technologies, and that just enhances what we're able to offer. So collaboratively, we know we have a solution which is a safe place to for this, and let's be honest, some of it is very sensitive data to reside.
Yep. Excellent. You're looking after my credit card and healthcare records, so I'm delighted with that, Sam. Thank you very much. Talking of industries,
yes.
You mentioned healthcare and finance verticals. Is there a limit to the scale or potential of what verticals this would reside in, or is it ubiquitous?
Yeah, there really is no limit, because ultimately everyone has this same problem. Data grows exponentially day by day. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head, but whenever you look at how much data have we created today versus last week and it's this huge curve like this. We create data at no time in history. That ultimately has to go somewhere at some point. It lives in your production systems today, and 6 months, 12 months, whatever, at some point it needs to come off those systems and be archived. So this requirement for archive is going nowhere. So we have to have a solution which is almost limitless in scale, and we know from our system that we can have at the moment, I'm going to say limitless amount of data sets, simply because we haven't found an amount that we've fallen over at. We haven't found a breaking point as yet. And then if we look at where you guys go with Isilon, that is a pretty much limitless scalability there. So someone would have to come along with a huge and vast data lake to cause a headache to us. But so far, we've yet to find anyone that can trouble either our application or the underpinning architecture from Dell Technologies.
Great, and I can probably help you with some numbers. I mean, about 80% of data in the world is unstructured, and that's growing about 50 to 80% year on year. And actually, you've touched on some interesting points there, because historically some of this sort of data gravity might have pushed it onto tape, but keeping these repositories online, people start realising there's a lot of value of data over time. So whilst a lot of what you're doing is making sure data gets deleted, there's also the value of that data when people are coming in requesting that kind of stuff, or maybe they're going to run some analytics, keeping it in that online repository, understanding where the data is and that kind of stuff. Again, that's a huge industry trend of keeping your data online, being able to do something with it.
Absolutely. I had a conversation with a customer a little while back, and they'd done a rather large archiving project. It wasn't recently, it was a few years back, to be fair to them. But they'd used, do you remember the old kind of big laser discs, the Plasmon?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember,
right, okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So they had, boxes upon boxes of these things. I said, okay, it's an interesting take on archiving. I said, what happens when you need to call that data back? Okay, well, we call, it was Iron Mountain or one of those type of people, said brilliant. And then the process for getting it back, and the penny dropped on the guy. He went, oh, we don't actually have the players anymore. And you think, crikey. And we've seen this before, where people have audio tapes in the likes of an Iron Mountain and so on, that's what they do. They're great at doing that. They've upgraded their call recording technology 3 or 4 times, and they're only backward compatible so far. So whilst tape is a great medium for storing data, if you can't bring it back into your environment and replay it, then at that point it becomes worthless. And using our solution, like you said, it's always on, and compliance and regulation is getting stiffer and tougher all the time. To give you an idea of how quickly we can find that data, so put in a request in the old-fashioned way. Go to Iron Mountain, get your box of tapes or plasma discs, whatever it might be, back. Try and find the right one. Try and find the right device to play it in. Play it back. Hope that it's not corrupt, and it may be in there somewhere. That's quite a lengthy process. We had a solution, as I said before, over 450 million records, well over a petabyte of data. That had a search time of sub 3 seconds and 100% accuracy. So when you start looking again at operational efficiencies versus tape and other different ways of trying to solve the archive problem, we are leagues ahead of where anybody else is. And from a function perspective, there are people out there that do a bit of what we do. So some people can do the voice, some people can do file. There isn't another product out there that can do unstructured, structured, voice, video, mainframe, etc., from one solution. So if you want to do this anywhere else, you pick your 4 or 5 different products and you try and weave them together, hopefully successfully, to solve a problem. Whereas in a very elegant way, we've done this with one solution.
Do you have any other sort of use cases around compliance you might want to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there are many. Okay, and I will start by just confirming to you that I'm not the compliance expert within StorARCH by any stretch of imagination, but you learn a bit from sitting around these meetings to listen to these people talk. And you've got things, obviously PCI, yes, clearly there's one. GDPR, there's another. The Freedom of Information Act, and that covers, covering all public bodies. Companies Act, for access to corporate financial records. Pharmaceuticals, things like HIPAA, and on and on and on. And actually, we have a slide that we share with customers where we put up a non-exhaustive list on a PowerPoint, and you literally can't fit them on. There's just too many. But it all pertains to the same thing. It's proving that you have this data, being able to access it in a timely fashion, proving that it's in the state that it was when you recorded it. It's not been manipulated in any way. And actually, in the process that we undertake with StorARCH, when we take a piece of data and redact it and then bring back a cleansed copy to site, the original piece of data is as was. So that can be submitted as evidence in a court of law, and we've proven that. We actually passed a report of compliance, a ROC. That's a financial industry term, but it just shows you that what we're doing proves that, I guess, everything is, for want of a better way of putting it, above board. We're doing what we say we can do, and the data is in its original format and untouched. And vitally important if you're getting into things like medical records and all these different governance and compliance acts. So again, if people are interested in learning more about specific verticals and the use cases and how we address those, then we have a lot of very intelligent people working at StorARCH that know about those industries and the use cases for StorARCH and how we solve those problems.
I think you're reminding me a little bit about my light bulb moment again. I'm thinking about all the conversation I have, all of the industries and lights takes, keeping a chain of custody, being able of the data, being able to present it in a court of law. It's just, there's so many use cases out there. So that light bulb moment's just resonating with me again.
Absolutely. And again, it was the same thing of, when you think about all these different verticals, again, they have the same problems. They have to retain this data. Think about pharmaceutical. I guess that's pretty spot on right now. All the different stuff's going on with COVID vaccinations, etc. There's lots of data that has to be recorded, and that has to be recorded for an awfully long time. Because if we ever have to refer back to it, we need to be able to refer back to it very quickly and know that data is as was and untouched. Something on the flip side of that, mortgage data, for instance. I wasn't aware till we started getting into this that your mortgage company keeps your mortgage on record for the life of the mortgage. So that could be 25, 30 years, depending on what sort of mortgage you've gone for, plus 7 years to life. Now that's a huge amount of time to keep a piece of data. And like I said before, someone built a solution at a point in time that was fit for purpose. It's not their fault that the world span ahead 20 years and things changed, and now the company's stuck with that legacy piece of technology. So we resolve it by retiring the costs, moving into StorARCH, greatly improving the operational efficiency, but keeping this data, I guess, sacred, but presentable in courts of law. That is vitally important that we can prove that, because it just adds validity to the credibility of our solution.
Perfect. I mean, fantastic examples. I think another part of compliance is also to delete data at the right time, and I'm pretty confident that the StorARCH solution provides that as well.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point, actually, Adam. Yeah, thanks for raising that. That is, I should call out that StorARCH is not it's not an off-the-shelf box. So it's not a case of how much storage do you need, this is your part code, ship it to site. There's a good piece of engagement we have to do with a customer up front. And that is understanding what data they have, where it is, etc., as well. You can imagine with the differing types of data people have across multiple different systems. The heavy lifting, if you like, at the front end of the project ensures success throughout the process. And part of that is understanding purge cycles. So what regulatory compliance pertains to your vertical, how long do you have to retain data for, and prove that you've retained it for that. But as important, when you purge data, you have to show and keep a record to prove that you have purged it. So we actually work with our customers, again, non-prescriptively, to work with them to design a purge engine around each individual data set, because they're different. And we cannot be prescriptive in that, otherwise we're not a useful application or useful solution at that point in time. So the team work very closely with our customers to understand what the purge cycle has to look like, and then how we evidence that we've done that.
Perfect, and thank you for that. And we're talking around life cycle management as well. And if we're talking around people keeping stuff for up to 99 years, for example, how do we keep the debt? We talked about old tape, etc. And so that's one of the things from an Isilon NESIS perspective. It's kind of an evolution of a cluster, evolution of an object store. So you'll never have to do a full data migration, that kind of stuff again, staying on those technologies. So we keep the chain of custody, the compliance from an application, we keep it from a platform and the plumbing underneath it. So again, we're providing a complete solution, so we're greater than the sum of our parts in that respect.
Absolutely, I think that's a good point. We've worked very closely with, I say we, my technical contingent have worked very closely with your technical contingent, looking at our code, your technology, to ensure that that we work over time. What I mean by that is your customer will invest in a platform today, and they may have, let's call it a 7 to 10 year refresh cycle on that installation. They need to know that if in 10 years time that StorARCH will still work on the next iteration. And that's why we work exclusively, I'll put my teeth back in, exclusively with Dell as our underpinning architecture, because we need to know that as we develop our product, that it will work with the next generation of products that you bring out, because you have a customer roadmap. They need to know they're investing in you today, and we talk again about technology cul-de-sacs, that they're investing with something that can change and evolve over time, and they're not stuck. Well, we did that with StorARCH, so we make sure that we're aligned with your roadmap and that we will work with the next generation and iteration of Dell Technologies. So at no point do we hit a crossroads where suddenly we don't work together anymore. We have to give them that reassurance that any investment in Dell and StorARCH is fit for purpose for the duration.
Okay, so Sam, it's been brilliant learning even more about this fantastic offering you've got. Sam, I'd like to personally thank you for your time today, the dedication to Dell Technologies in this, and discuss the innovative solution with us. Team and I look forward to continuing working with you and your team, and really looking forward to some successful engagements going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.